If you calculate your carbon emissions and you look at the calculation you've done and go, oh my God, the previous year is wrong, what should you do? Let's have a look. It's not a problem, but let's have a look at what you should do. So what happens when you've calculated your carbon footprint, you look at it and go, oh my God, that's a work of art. I really like what we've done there. But you look at the previous year and go, hang on a second, there's some mistakes in there. The typical mistakes you might see in there, either A, the calculation methodology is wrong. So say, for example, you've multiplied the amount of diesel you've used, for example, by the petrol carbon factor, or you've just maybe got a bug in the data. We see this sometimes when people type in, instead of typing in litres into the software platform, they type in, the amount of money they've spent or something like that. Okay, so it could be bugs that the data is wrong, or it could be the fact that the carbon factor has changed. And this is going to happen more and more and more as the carbon emissions statements of companies change, as they start to include scope 3, which, as you know, is the complicated one of the carbon factors. That's where all the complexity lay. This is especially true in supply chain. People are just getting to grips with this now. They're just getting to a point where they're starting to include their supply chain emissions in their net zero statements. And so if you use the supplier figure from a previous year that was this much, because all they did is quote scope 1 and scope 2, then suddenly they include their scope 3 and it increases to this much, your carbon footprint is going to be wrong. It's going to get worse, and it's nothing that you've done. You're doing all the carbon reduction projects. It's just that the previous year's figures didn't include their scope 3 factors, and it's not your fault. It's just the way the system works. So what should you do? It's either you've made a mistake, or the calculation factors have changed, or the supply chain emissions mean that the supplier figure used before it just wasn't correct. What should you do? Well, there's two things you can do. First is you can just take it on the chin, and this is what I'd probably recommend you do. Add a footnote to the bottom of the carbon calculation and say, do you know what? We used a figure from supplier X before, which has changed from X to Y, which has caused the increase in carbon emissions. That's the simplest thing to do. Okay, and that's what most people do. To add a footnote and just say, look, for the following reasons, year-on-year comparisons are going to be difficult because of what I've just explained. The second thing you can do if you want is either, it's got a couple of names, dual reporting or parallel reporting. Parallel reporting sounds posh, doesn't it? All it means is you write down two carbon footprint factors. You write down the carbon footprint factor of year 1 and year 2 using the data that you know now. That is your carbon footprint. That's using the most up-to-date data that you know. But then you restate the previous year and say, had we used the correct data for the previous year, it would have resulted in this, which would result in improvement of this. Now that's more work, because you have to go back and recalculate it, which if you're not using a software platform like Anistic or one of the others out there, then you have to go through and manually redo everything, which is a pain in the rear end, which I suspect is why most people put a footnote in. But that's probably the most comprehensive thing to do, is to actually restate all the figures and just say, year 1, year 2, knowing what we know now is this, but we previously restated as this incorrectly, it should have been that, which will allow the year-on-year comparison. If you want the quick route, just add a footnote. It is changing. People do understand that this is going on, and anybody in the carbon sector looks at it and go, well, of course it's changing. People are getting more sophisticated at this as they go. Okay, so if you want more details of all of this, have a look at my book, Net Zero for Business. It's available on Amazon, and if you wanted to give it a good review on Amazon, I'd love you forever and a day. But it's a practical guide on how your business can get to net zero. So I hope it's useful for you. I don't make any money from the book. It's a labour of love, and it's my gift back to the community to say, look, let's cut our carbon emissions. We need to do that. Okay, I hope that was useful, and I'll see you next time.